Az önce vicdan odaklı bir sohbet gerçekleştirildi ve zirvenin açılışında söylediğimiz gibi önce insan ve vicdan diyeceğiz dedik. Şehir hayatında hepimiz konforu özlüyoruz. Barınma, ulaşım, sosyalleşme sorunlarımız var ve insan odaklı düşünmeye ve bunu hayata geçirmeye çok ihtiyacımız var. Peki bunu nasıl yapacağız? Gerçekten de bu söylemde mi kalacak ve bunu hayata geçirmek için neleri değiştirmemiz gerekiyor? İlk önce sanıyorum biraz önce de söylendi, bakış açımızı, kafalarımızı değiştirmemiz gerekiyor. Dünya çapında önemli bir ismi ağırlayacağız birazdan ve sahneyi onu misafir etmek için sevgili Serdar'a bırakıyorum.
Sevgili Elif, çok teşekkürler. Gördüğün gibi bana kaldın sahnede bundan sonra. Seninle birlikte keyifli sürdüreceğiz. Sevgili dostlar, tekrardan sizlerle birlikteyiz. Şimdi çok değerli bir konuğumu ağırlayacağım. Kendisi uzun yıllar Steve Jobs'la yan yana çalıştı. Apple'ın perakende stratejisinin sıfırdan kurulması noktasında görev aldı. Hatta belki görenleriniz olmuştur. 5. Cadde'deki New York'taki o ikonik binanın tasarlanması süreçlerini yönetti. Bununla birlikte şu anda dünyada çok önemli projelerde hem tasarım gözüyle hem danışmanlık gözüyle yer alıyor. Gerçekten çok yaptığına kıyasla mütevazi ve dostane yaklaşımıyla çok sevdiğim bir dostum. Müsaadenizle şimdi İngilizceye geçeceğiz. Tercüme dinlemek isteyen değerli dostlarımız olursa cihazları şimdi takmanın tam zamanı sevgili dostlar. Ladies and gentlemen, we are more than honored to host a very distinguished speaker and thought leader today. He used to work with Steve Jobs for the retail strategy of Apple for many years, and then he founded 8 Inc., experience and human-centered design company. Now he is helping many brands, many governments to create more human-centered and experience-centered projects, buildings, living spaces, gadgets, anything you name it. So without further ado, I would like to invite Tim Kobe on the stage with me. Tim. It takes 2 minutes to walk from one edge to the other, so I'll be walking you to the other edge.
Okay.
So, good to have you back in Istanbul, Tim.
Thank you.
I think it has been like 2 years since we met here in Istanbul.
That's right.
But a lot of things happened since your last visit to Istanbul. And those things are really, really related to what we are going to talk about today, because the main pillar of our theme to these 2 days is conscious. So we are trying to put human at the center of everything, and this is what you do, what your design strategy and philosophy tells us. But before we kick in with the human-centered design, I would like to talk about a little bit on experience. Because as much as I remember, 24 years ago, Joseph Pine penned an article in our magazine and introduced the concept of experience economy and the book.
That's right.
He mentioned that in the upcoming decades, companies and brands will not look for new products and services. They will look for and they will design and they will sell experiences. So experience is the buzzword of creating difference, as much as I can tell from the articles that we published. So, what is your take about the concept of experience? Why are we so much obsessed about experiences in business?
Yeah, I think it's probably a mistake to think of it as a consumable business buzzword. Mm-hmm. It's been around quite a while in terms of an idea. And if you look at Joe Pine's materials, which you mentioned, you see the progression of successful economies, successful businesses, and they follow similar patterns, which he identified in that book. I think what's probably interesting about the idea that experience has the kind of legs that it has is the fact that it not only helps in any performance from a business standpoint. In other words, I can extract a competitive advantage in any business by focusing on the experience that people have with the products or services. But beyond that, it gives us an opportunity to focus on relevance, gives us an opportunity to focus on our humanity. And ultimately, what it does is it gives the tools that we need in particularly turbulent times. And it's hard not to agree that this is one of the more turbulent times we've been in. So I think that as a initial premise for it is very important.
Yeah, I remember an article saying that experiences are transforming people in terms of behaviors, in terms of mindsets, in terms of their approach to products and services. And these are the times that we need this competitive advantage the most. But also, you put a strong emphasis on the broad experience concept. You just highlighted the human experience. Why do you think the human experience is such important concept or an approach, and what does it mean to put people at the center of experiences?
Well, I think it's easy for companies and people to get lost along the way in terms of developing new products and services and new solutions. We use something called the value creation engine, which is a structure for any type of conversation that is somewhat the inverse of what maybe they teach in business school, what they teach in other applications, but it's to put human outcomes as the primary driver. And those are the things that make you feel something and connect you with other people or other brands or other companies. And then the second thing is the idea of forming the strategy that supports those outcomes. So you can have lots of strategy companies creating lots of strategies, but unless they support those human outcomes, they're really not delivering great value. And then the third thing is the tactics. And ironically, we typically focus on tactics first in almost every case. I know certainly our clients, one of the first things they start to talk about is tactically how we're going to respond. And what we try to do is to put that part of the conversation at the end. Once we've established human outcomes and the strategy, then the tactics can be deployed. And what it does is it de-risks any endeavor that you're undertaking, but it does it in a way that's always aligned with what a positive human outcome will be. And the best way to create value is to make things that other people value. It seems like a pretty simple premise, but that's how I would approach it.
You know, there's a famous quotation of a data that says that nearly 75% of strategies are failing or are not delivering what is expected from the strategies. And the main reason maybe we start with tactics, or we confuse tactics with strategies. So this is why human-centered approach or human experience is very crucial, because it is focusing on the human outcome other than everything, or prioritizing human outcome other than everything.
That's right. It should be the driver or the guide.
Right. It very much relates to what we are talking today, Tim, because we are talking about the future of cities. We are talking about how the design and the governance of the modern city is changing. So I know that you have been advising a lot of projects. You have been involved a lot of urban projects, including some projects in Asia, in Middle East, as much as I know, and most of them are famous projects that we hear a lot. You have been a part of those. So when you look at the big picture, how do you think the structure and the philosophy of cities are changing, and what are some dynamics that are enabling this change?
So I think, and maybe this is coming from our technology background, but I think that we've been operating in an outdated operating system, that it's fragmented. We haven't had really human focus at the center. It's very task-oriented. And Thomas Friedman wrote a nice book on called "Thank You for Being Late," and he talks about the need for a new operating system.
Right.
And this means that we need to move from linear thinking to lateral thinking, essentially. We need to start framing the way we plan cities or the way we plan products around the idea that we have to have multiple points of entry, we have multiple points of engagement, and we have to have a flexibility that's built into the system. He calls it a dynamic stability, which is a bit of an oxymoron, but,
but
you know,
sounds good.
Yeah, sounds good. And you know, I think the idea is that, you know, if you look at these kinds of problems, the old methodology is not going to deliver new outcomes. It's going to put us back into the same repetitive pattern, and that's part of what everybody is seeing in business. It's what they're seeing in, you know, the issues we're dealing with the environment, with you know, almost everything that you look at.
And actually, this is something that we have been writing a lot, Tim, because it's like a rabbit hole. You are trying to solve very complicated, wicked, modern problems with old formulas, old operating system, as you have put it through, and it's not working. So we are not satisfied with the outcomes, we are not satisfied with the process, we are not satisfied with the results that we are getting out of this system. And this is why I think we are challenging the current system, for instance, the economical system, or the free market capitalism, if I may. And all the systems are under huge, huge challenge throughout this. So, of course, designing and governing cities requires a lot of hands, hearts, and heads. So there are a lot of stakeholders around. We can talk about the government, we can talk about NGOs, say it, private sector companies, some non-profits, so on and so forth. So a lot of stakeholders should be coming together and to work on the wicked issues that we are facing in urban areas or for the designing the future of cities. So what is your perspective about creating a collaboration between those stakeholders? What roles should those stakeholders assume, and how can they collaborate for a better human outcome?
Well, I think rather than look at the human outcome necessarily as the end result, it should be the starting point for any one of the processes. And you know, if you look at you know, there are many cities that are built around the automobile. On our way here, we sat in a significant amount of automotive.
So you stuck in the traffic, I guess.
We had that. Okay. But you know, the idea is that the mindset behind the automobile as the way to organize cities, particularly during COVID, is proven to be a failure. I mean, people would argue that we're running out of the area that we need for automotive solutions as a form of transportation. And I think, you know, you look at future city projections, you look at autonomous flight vehicles, you look at other ways of you know, getting around. I think the idea is that you look at those human outcomes as guidelines. The other thing is, you know, from the policymaker perspective, from the development perspective, we saw in some cities in the U.S. where the leadership of the city created the incentives to provide for the behavior that they were looking for. So in other words, they would provide benefits to the developers, to the contractors, to the tax base, what have you, to respond to conditions that they felt were vital to a successful city. And the idea that having a bedroom community far away from where people worked and things, this whole idea of having that commute aspect built into it started to become you know, obsolete. And I think that's part of what we have to look at when we start to establish any type of incentive or policy that's going to influence the constructed world.
Right. Also, that is becoming more obvious after COVID, I guess,
That's right.
Tim, because the future of work, when we are talking about the future of work, I think hybrid is here to stay. So it is not something, it's not like a romantic trend that we had during COVID and will vanish, but it will stick around a little bit, maybe in a large portion, but it will be the reality of life. So the relation between personal life and the work life is changing, so you don't need to be at the office, and even you don't need to be at the city that your headquarters is located. So I think these kind of change in the way we work or deal with work is also affecting the design and the concept of cities. Do you subscribe to that?
Absolutely. We've recently completed some work with JLL about this, back to work idea.
Right.
And one of the things that became very clear is that we as an industry were approaching the solution in a very tactical way. We were going to add juice bars, and we were going to add swimming pools, and we were going to,
PlayStation.
It was all about tactics. We're going to add this tactic or that tactic. And ultimately what happened was we were still seeing an extraordinarily high level of people who were planning to leave their job, who were planning to move to new jobs. Something like, in Asia, I think it was something like 72% of senior executives were planning on quitting. And so it was
great attrition.
Yeah, it was a remarkable example of the fact that we haven't solved for the human outcome. We may have solved a tactical work on an appliance, but we haven't solved the experience that people are having. And this circles back to your point about designing the experience. If people aren't achieving the kinds of satisfaction that make what they feel their life more valuable, then it's very, very hard now to get them to participate.
Right.
And so it's become a real interesting shift, and the statistics back it up in almost every part of the world that we've looked at.
Sure. As much as I remember, 4 or 5 years ago, World Economic Forum's Global Risk Report mentioned a risk called unhappiness, because people are not satisfied, people are not happy with their work, with their school, with the city they live in. So the unhappiness creates anxiety, and anxiety creates the decline in the performance. So it is quite a significant thing that we should be taking into consideration while we are designing or redesigning cities. But besides that, as we are talking about human-centered design, we need to include all stakeholders, even the citizens of the cities maybe, to the design process or to the processes that are effective on the way of living in the cities. But how successful are we, or how can we co-create, co-design cities, urban areas by including all relevant stakeholders and citizens in the equation?
So I think it's moving from a monologue to a dialogue, but it's like to have everyone work on the design of a city is a bit like having everyone do brain surgery. It's not something that everyone necessarily can do. Everyone can have an opinion and contribute to the opinion, and then ultimately you need people who are very competent at producing those things. But right now we don't have the tools for the dialogue. We have the monologue. We may have a meeting and bring a group of people in from a particular community and get some buy-in and stack the audience with the right number of votes and all of that. But the reality is that we don't have a continuous dialogue in place or a methodology for that dialogue to continue to occur. And it's interesting, in Dubai, they've added 2 senior ministers to the government. One is the Minister of Artificial Intelligence, who's looking at cities from a cognitive city standpoint. The other is Minister of Happiness, and her job is fundamentally to understand the temperature of people's attitudes and how they're feeling about the way they're living, and to get that feedback. But I think it takes systematic change for those types of inputs to actually have influence.
Right. It will be a good idea to appoint a vice mayor of happiness maybe for the cities
Could be.
that only deals with how we can make people happier with their experience in the cities, but why not? Tim, also we have been seeing a lot of catastrophes going through. According to my notes, in the last year or so, there has been more than, for the last decade, there has been more than 12 climate incidents that have costed more than $1 billion only in US. So we have been seeing a lot of environmental, natural disaster-wise, or sociological issues hitting the cities. When you consider these wicked problems, the complex problems, how do you think those dynamics affect the design of the cities and the way we live in urban places?
Well, I mean, according to all predictions, we're going to see an increase in what we've been seeing already. So I think part of it is our ability to deal with those types of things as they're occurring for the people who are immediately affected. We just went through that in Maui, in Hawaii, with a large fire. But you know, I think that fundamentally there needs to be a bit more, not information, because I think information is sort of a certain amount of value. There has to be a bit more intelligence that we're deriving from the sensors, from the feedback, from the information that technology has the capability to provide for us. But technology is not the solution, it's part of the solution.
Right.
And I think the other part of this is the recognition that we need to understand the resources that we're using, and particularly, you know, in a construction industry, we're 60% of carbon footprint comes from construction industry. We have a fair amount of work to do in the category about looking at local resources and being able to build from the materials that we have available within a particular context.
Right.
And, you know, Vancouver, for example, they're passing new building codes that reflect the fact that cross-laminated timber construction will be requirement for the codes, and a big part of that is they have a lot of timber. Well, you don't want to give that same criteria to Dubai because they don't have a lot of timber. So, you know, recognizing the way that we manage our resources, the way we think about our resources, will start to give us a leg up on that.
Great. Lastly, Tim, you have mentioned that technology is improving a lot. It is here. We have talked about AI, predictive analytics, IoT, autonomous driving, a lot of new concepts and technologies in the previous sessions. But if you envision the city of the future, let's say 20, 30 years later, what will it look like? Is it a place that the flying cars are all around and people just transport from one place to other place with tunnels? Or is it something that is very similar to what we are experiencing today? How do you think the future of cities will look like?
I think, you know, when you try to predict these types of things, it's always risky. One of the things I know is that a significant country in the Middle East is looking at all of the IP that's available for any form of future living and looking to be a high percentage partner in each one of those technologies. And the point is that they're investing in and covering their bets as to whether it's tunnels or whether it's autonomous flight vehicles, what are the different technologies that may be in the future. But that if we look at moving to using, you know, eliminating carbon or less carbon footprints, then there's a replacement in mind from an IP standpoint that they can own. And so I know they're already making strategic bets and, you know, investments in that way of thinking about the problem.
Right. So it is like investing in the future of cities in the domain of IP. So they will control all the new developments and innovations or be a part of it. That seems to be a smart strategy.
Yeah.
I think most of our guests have already guessed which country you are mentioning. So, Tim, thank you very much for your time. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
Appreciate.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, I'm letting you go.
Okay.
And now we will be continuing with Elif. Elif, lütfen bana katılır mısın sahnede?
Çok teşekkürler.